Welcome in. I'm excited to have a conversation with you this week that will help to explain the background of my new children's book, My Grandpa's Grandpa. And this is going to be a conversation with Nathan Andersen, who helped me bring this idea and bring this story to actual physical life. What we're going to do is start out with me giving you the background of the inspiration, the idea for the book. And then Nathan is going to start asking me questions about the experience with working with him. And we're doing this from the standpoint of being able to share the experience with you, from being able to really go from that idea down to getting a book published and having a physical copy in your hand. What we want to definitely do is make sure that you understand that we're promoting to get your story down. If you've got an idea for a children's book, a young adult novel, a piece of fiction, a piece of nonfiction, whatever it is, we want to encourage you to start writing and get that story down. Then what we want you to do, and hopefully this conversation really helps with this, is to be able to decide what path you're going to go down. Are you going to go self-publishing? Are you going to work with Amazon, let's say? Are you going to work with somebody else and go down the publishing route? Or are you going to go with self-publisher or boutique type publishing? So there's different options out there. And so we're going to cover some of those. The other part of this too is that we want to explore and share with you a little bit about how Nathan and his company Babooky can help you if you want to go that self-publishing route, and what kind of support he really gives you, because there's a lot of these self-publishing organizations where you simply just turn in your manuscript, you make some decisions on your own, and then they give you what you come up with, and there's not a lot of collaboration. So we want you to have a good understanding of this. I do want to remind you the book is up for sale. You can go to cool-grandpa.us, look for the bookstore, and then you can follow the links into that if you want to order the book. Now, the other thing too is you can definitely go to Amazon, look for the book, and you can get a Kindle version or you can order a hardback through Amazon. The last part is I would really love it if you could help me out and support the podcast by going to buymeacoffee.com/coolgrandpa and support the podcast at whatever level you feel comfortable with. But your donations will help offset the cost of producing the podcast and getting it out there so we can support other grandfathers and grandparents in their journey to be awesome, awesome grandparents. Without further ado, let's jump into this conversation. Hello, and welcome to the Cool Grandpa Podcast. This is your host, Greg Payne, coming at you from Studio 12. This podcast is about being the best possible grandpa you can be, focusing on what it is to be a grandpa and how we can all share that experience together for our grandchildren. Hi, Nathan. Thanks so much for being on the Cool Grandpa Podcast. I'm looking forward to this conversation because I've got the book out and there's so much stuff that we've got going on together that I'm excited for us to sit down and kind of document and talk about this.
Yeah, thanks, Greg. It's a pleasure to be on your show again. And it's been a long journey for you, but I hope it's paid off, in the long run. And I think it turned out to be a great project. So I appreciate that too.
We're super excited about it. And folks, as we're recording this, I just received all the boxes of books about a week ago. So now I've got the hardback copies of the books, and I'm to that point where we're marketing and starting to sell and doing all that kind of good stuff. But I wanted to back up a little bit just to let people know how this book came about and give some history for it. So what I'm wanted to do is take the audience, and Nathan, you may have heard some of this before, but some of it may be new to you. And it'd be interesting to compare and contrast some of the other creative stories that you've had with children's books and other authors. But for me, I've been doing the Cool Grandpa podcast for about 2.5 years now. And about a year or so into it, I had started thinking about stories and writing and doing something else to go along with the podcast. But then I had been interviewing people that had written children's books about grandfathers. So I've had several people from England, from the US, from Canada, and I was interested in what sparked them in writing a book about grandparents. And while I was doing that, I think I was outside just kind of messing around in the yard. But I remembered that in one of my conversations that I had had where I had been thinking and talking with somebody about how grandfathers are really that bridge to ancestors, and the ancestors in this case are near relatives, meaning, my grandfather that my grandson's never going to meet, but that we've kind of got this bridge with little kids. You know how it goes where you start to tuck them into bed and you get like 20 questions. They don't want to go to sleep. They start asking questions. And I thought it would be cool to have a little kid start asking his grandfather about his grandfather from that standpoint of, hey, grandpa's older than dirt. Did you even have a grandfather? When does time kind of start for those little kids? And so I started writing that book down. I had interviewed our good friend Thal Dixon, who's written a number of award-winning books. Through that conversation about his grandfather, about his books, he connected us, and it was great because it was like, okay, I've got this idea for a book. I've kind of started writing it, and now I've got somebody that's in this business that I've got an introduction for. And so that was really, really a great way of being connected and then learning about the different publishing options that are out there, because it's not just like it was maybe 30 years ago where you've got to find an agent, you've got to find a publisher, you've got to send your manuscript through them, they've got to work with it. Now it's, we've got print on demand, we've got all these different options. And, it was great for Thal to introduce us. And so, Nathan, what I'd love to do is talk a little bit about this process of us coming together. And, what do you typically see from authors? I know my story, like I said, as I had something on a Word doc, and it was like I needed somebody to start to help funnel those ideas and help corral the sheep, so to speak. What were some of the things, and did I approach you kind of similar to how other people approach you with an idea for a book, especially maybe a first-time author?
Well, when the clients reach out to me and they talk to me, a lot of them are in different areas of their self-publishing journey. Some begin with just an idea and they're like, hey, I got an idea. Can you give me some guidance of how to even begin writing? I have one client right now. He has the ideas, but he's never written a children's book. This is his lifelong dream. He said one of his dreams for me to say, yeah, keep your words around 500 to 700. I mean, a lot of authors may not know some of these small things, but basically any of my clients, they come in different areas and you already had your idea, you've already had it written. And so you were just looking to bring, get get the manuscript illustrated. Then I reached out to you and I asked you, what are you looking for as far as imagery? And you showed me some samples. I paired you up with one of our illustrators, and it's the same illustrator that's worked on a couple of Thal's books and my books too. So he's fantastic, and I think Greg showed me this illustration of a picture book. Ross, what's his name? Ross.
Oh, that Bob Ross, that Bob Ross children's book. Yeah.
So he showed me an image of that, and then I had my illustrator, do a sample from that and using some of your characters, and I think he did a fabulous job bringing in that style with the nostalgia and kind of this vintage flair. I really like it.
Yeah, that was one of the things that I really enjoyed once we were able to get engaged, because I think we had a few different options there, but then really Narayan really set himself apart, and I think had a fun nostalgia part of it, but it was still a kid's book, if that makes any sense, where it's not like a straight and I know there's children's books where the illustrations are much more, I don't know, realistic, but he had that playfulness, I think, within some of that, because there are back and forth between my grandfather's time period, which, let's say, anywhere 20s, 30s, 40s, etc., and then modern day stuff. And so he did a great job of blending that together.
When we got Narayan on board with this project, I mean, a lot of the I remember we had this conversation because sometimes an illustrator may not see things the most. I don't know. Everyone's got their own opinions and ideas, and especially me. But I didn't want to show your book where they're just in bed reading, telling stories every scene, and like some cloudy memory. I wanted the character to be, I wanted both characters to be deep into the story and have it going on live, like while they're there, like they're in the moment, kind of like that Christmas story, where the ghost takes him away and he's like seeing things, like I kind of wanted it like that. And so I ran that idea by you and you liked it. And I just think it added so much more to it than, hey, Charlie sitting in bed and his grandpa telling him on the side of the bed.
Right. And that was,
So
yeah, I was going to say that was one of the huge value adds that you brought to the project and the process was your background and then some of the vision and ideas for that. Because being a first time person through this process, there's a little bit of, I have an idea of what I want, but it's also not super crystallized because I don't know necessarily what's possible and what's not possible.
yeah, it's always good to have, different eyes on a project, thinking things differently. And even with my ideas, I'll shoot them out to an illustrator and I'll just say, whatever you think is best, or do you have an idea? But this is kind of where I'm going. I work, a lot of, I don't know if my clients realize this, a lot of them, but I do a lot of the compositions with the illustrator. So I kind of work hand in hand and create these because I've worked with illustrators where sometimes I get stuff back and I feel like if all the pages kind of, I don't know if you've ever seen a picture book where you turn the page and they all kind of seem to be the same in a sense that maybe it's just a different background, but it's almost the same angle, same everything, especially through self-published books. I see this a lot. So it's good to steer your illustrator into ways where they can think a little bit out of the box.
The great thing is working with you and the illustrator was the back and forth on it, because there wasn't so much like, hey, this is how it's going to be, this is what we're doing, but there was a lot of back and forth. Hey, what about this? What if we tweak this? And there was a lot of that real collaboration, amongst, I don't know how many time zones we have going on here, but it's kind of crazy, but the response time and everything was really pretty quick. I know you guys were waiting on me for decisions at times, and that's kind of how life is. But it was working really fast together, and that was one of the things too I wasn't quite prepared for, being a first timer. Is I use this analogy of you kind of jump in a river and there's a current that goes and you're kind of in that current. Once you kind of talk with Nathan and you're like, hey, I want to do this and let's get going, and you've got those electronic handshakes and all that kind of good stuff. Once I got into this and we've got the working manuscript going back and forth, and we're starting to settle in on some of the illustration styles, and we've started that process going, it was like being in a river, in the sense of there's this current that you're kind of into, And now, everybody needs ideas back and forth. Everybody needs input. You need approvals for certain things. It was a great collaboration in that I don't think anybody was waiting on anybody for an extended period of time. And we got some decisions made, and we had feedback coming back from the illustrator really quickly with like revisions and, hey, what about this? And let's try this. So that was a great experience.
Yeah, I remember when we brought up the cover idea. That was kind of towards the end, and I wanted to kind of do the same thing we were doing, within the story. I'm like, we need to bring in some kind of scene, something from your grandpa, not just of grandpa and a kid sitting on a bed, but bring in kind of what the story's about. And I remember you, because we hadn't even mentioned the fishing really in the book, and I remember you mentioned the fishing in the dock, and to me, I was like, that's fabulous because the bed is like a dock in a way. Like I could totally imagine a kid playing on a bed like it's a fishing dock. So that was a great idea. And then I remember you also brought up a tractor idea, and I just was thinking, I was trying to figure out how the bed would transfer into a tractor, and I just felt like the dock worked so much better. How'd you feel about that?
Yeah, I did too. The feedback that I've had from that, especially even from aunts and uncles and people in the family, has been super positive. And what was great about that for folks that maybe haven't seen the cover for this is there's a elongated bed with myself and my grandson up at the head of the bed where I'm tucking him in, and then as the bed's coming towards the person viewing it, the reader, yeah, it kind of transforms into a dock with my grandfather character, kind of at the end of the dock with a pail of fish and a seagull sitting right there. And, that really led into, I think, and set the tone for the rest of the book, because so many of those illustrations that we have that kind of, here's the characters, here's the modern characters, and then here's the scene and the character of my grandfather doing something different, but they're combined, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I think the cover turned out fabulous, and for those who don't know, Greg put a nice spot UV touch on his cover there, and spot UV is where you got a matte cover, but certain parts are varnished with a gloss, and so that's what Greg did with his cover upgrade. It was turned out really nice.
Yeah, and I was glad we did that because although the book's not really, I don't know, the book has some, I don't know, supernatural to it, in the sense of my grandfather who's passed away is a character within the book. On the cover, he has a little bit of that varnish and that finish to it, so that it really sets him apart and highlights that, hey, there's a difference. There's a, I don't know how to describe it. I almost want to say it's almost
just
like,
makes your eyes kind of go to that area.
Yeah, absolutely. It draws you in. And then the question for the reader, just looking at that front cover, is, okay, what's going on here? Because you've got this bed, and then you've got this thing that becomes a dock, and then you've got this character with a bucket of fish and a fishing pole. And,
right.
So it draws some curiosity there. And so I thought the cover really worked out well and set the tone for the book. And then especially we changed up the fonts a little bit too, because on the cover we have kind of a crayon type font on it. So it's a little bit, and the title of the book is My Grandpa's Grandpa, right? So that would be like the character Charlie in the book writing out the title, that it's his title.
And we went back and forth on a couple ideas on that too, which I think in the end it was best this way. But originally we were talking about having the first grandpa having this antique font, the second grandpa, having his 80s font, and then the Charlie having a Cren font. But I think you're absolutely right when it came down to, this is coming from Charlie's, imagination and perception. And I think it turned out better this way.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And that was one of the reasons I was so happy to get engaged with you through Thal, is because I felt like I had control throughout the whole process, but then I had the expert kind of walking with me, where I think some engagements and maybe some first-time authors, you can kind of feel like you're just being led along or you're being herded in a different direction. But I think the way that you worked with a lot of question and answers back and forth to kind of get the temperament of, where was my head at? What was I willing to do? Where were some of the boundaries and things that I had really worked out well.
For sure. I was going to ask you, how did you meet Thal? I mean, I know you guys met because he's been on your show, but
Sure.
What was the initial meeting like?
Oh, man. Okay. So Thal and I know each other from growing up in Northern Virginia. So we've known each other since probably 1984. And
wow.
Yeah, so we had known each other, and there's definitely been periods of time where like we haven't spoken in years, and then come together. And then, some of that was even when we were both going to school in Idaho for a little while. And that was odd because it was one of those like, hey, wait, I knew you from like a couple of years ago. And then, we reconnected and had a really good time and just kind of stayed in contact off and on. I mean, that's one of the great things with Facebook and other social medias. It kind of lets you find, buddies that you're not around and not close to anymore. But yeah, so Thal and I connected through there. But yeah, we had known each other. We'd played basketball together. Ran around, got in trouble, all that kind of thing. In Thal's, I think like a year or so behind me in high school. But we had a lot of the same friends in the same circles. And so
you guys were like, on each other's top 10 buddy list, do you think? Pretty close? Or was it like more of acquaintances that you sometimes hung around with?
I think when we were together, it would be top 10 buddy list. But when we were, when we were separated and things like that, then it just kind of dropped off. And
but you guys had other things in common besides books, because you guys were doing other things. And then you possibly, I guess you knew he wrote books, and then you were like, well, I do have an idea. Who else to ask but Thal? Was that kind of how?
Yeah, that was it. A lot of it going back was I had interviewed probably 4 or 5 people about children's books that they did about grandfathers, because I was interested in that from just a topic of like, hey, what motivated you to write a book that had your grandfather in it? And so went through that process, and then definitely connected with Thal and was like, hey, who are you using? What's going on? What's this process? How do I jump into this thing? I've got an idea and I might as well run with it.
So after this whole process has been done, and you've utilized my services, and I've coached you through some things. You've got stuck on a couple issues. I was going to ask you, with all those things, have you felt like, man, I kind of like this. I kind of maybe will write another one, because I notice a lot of authors, when after their first picture book, they do kind of like, I could, I got this other idea.
Yeah, for sure. Part of this is been a little bit of just kind of myself thinking like, there's a couple of other ideas that I've got going on. And then some of it too is I've got 2 granddaughters. And so there's a little bit now within the family about, hey, when are you going to do a book that has this granddaughter? And when are you going to do a book about this granddaughter? And,
Yeah.
so there's a little bit of that. And of course, people are asking me, so when are you going to do my grandpa's grandma? Right.
Yeah.
Which would be a great one because I don't want to, even though this is the Cool Grandpa podcast and, I'm focused on grandfathers, grandmothers are hugely important as well. And it's always fun, let grandpa talk about his grandma and have a similar type story or something completely different. I haven't quite landed on how
Yeah, I
that's
mean, the
going to work.
first idea, the first thought I had was, my grandma's grandma, because you kind of did the opposite of that one. I do have a client. She's kind of similar. She's got these grandkids, and she started one book, and that book centralized around one character, her grandkids, and then she did a second one. She told me eventually, she's like, I guess I'm gonna have to pop out at least a few more of these for each of my grandkids, but she's been busy selling her books. She's ready to reprint one of them, so it's fabulous, and it's great to see when authors, really get out there and get their books sold. And what are your plans to do that?
Right now, I've worked my way through that KDP Amazon setup for I've got the Kindle book. The ebook is set up on Amazon right now. I just was approved today as a seller for Amazon. So now I've got to go set up the store and everything on Amazon to get that there. And then I'm also working through setting up a WooCommerce. It's an online store that would plug into my website so that I can sell directly off the website. But then the other thing that I'm working on as well is going to the local Barnes & Noble. There's some small bookstores and gift shops and things in the area, and just kind of doing I want to say the old time, throw a box of books in the car and go knock on some of these doors and go, hey, can we work out a deal with, sell you 5 books and let's see how it goes.
I've thought of that kind of stuff too, and the Barnes and Nobles. I told you the other day they have an event called Author Palooza. Which, have you been in there to ask about that yet?
I have not. I was slammed over this weekend, but they're on my list to go stop by this week to go talk to them, the local branch here.
Nice. Are you planning to do like a podcast where you basically, hey, this is the launch of the book date, get your copy now? Is there going to be an official launch of My Grandpa's Grandpa?
Yeah, I think what I'm wanting to do is get everything in place with Amazon and then on my website first, so that I can start really taking orders in. Now, what all good authors ought to be listening to this, and in my opinion, I've been telling everybody in my network, hey, I've got the books in, they've arrived, I'm ready to start selling, I can sell in person. And my wife sold 2 books, and so I've sold another 3 books. So just in the last few days, as I've been starting to talk about this, I've already sold 5 books. I've got a long ways to go, but at the same time, I think people ought to, as you start to get stuff going, start to get stuff out there. And then to your point, I do want to have kind of an official kickoff, launch date, but I kind of consider this the soft opening as I'm getting everything in place.
And when I talked to you also, through our conversations about, submitting it to some awards and stuff, and there's bloggers and reviewers, and if any of your followers, your podcast followers are listening and they get a copy, giving Greg an Amazon review is a huge, benefit. Authors really appreciate those reviews, and it doesn't take much of your time either. I mean, you're on there, even sometimes you don't even have to write a sentence. You can just type the stars and put a headline or whatever. It's pretty simple. Yeah, we appreciate those reviews. What advice would you give them for anyone who's feeling overwhelmed with, hey, I got an idea, but I just feel like it's going to be too hard?
Yeah. So for people that have an idea, and this is actually an awesome question, because this weekend I went to the Atlanta Writers Club. First time I've ever been there. Before the club meeting started, they had tables and everything with genres, right? So I went over to the kids' table thinking, oh, I'm going to learn a lot from somebody. I actually had a couple of women there that were in this situation where they have a manuscript, but they don't know what to do. And because working with you, I was able to go, okay, so here's what you want to do. Do this, do this, do this. And, started to lay out a little bit of a plan for them. And so for somebody that has an idea, I would say, look at that guidance, 500, 700 words, get that written down, get that initial brain dump of the idea down. Editors for children's books, I think I went through a couple of them, and I think they were like $25 each. So not very expensive to have an editor, and they will really help you out with the punctuation, with asking some questions as far as like, hey, this doesn't make sense, or you used, a capitalization here, but not here. What were you, so it's always good to get that second set of eyes on it. And then definitely working with Nathan, kind of get that guidance. And I go back to that river analogy, kind of get into that flow, because once you start to get into it and you start to submit that, then I think the next steps start to just kind of appear. And so each step along the way just kind of will logically fall into place. You also have that analogy of the best way to eat an elephant is one bite at a time. So don't let the technology intimidate you. Don't think of the options as something that is going to be really a hindrance. I like the idea, and what I was telling these women is the way that we've worked together is I've got control. I didn't have to go shop this around for an agent and spend 6 months or a year finding an agent that's then going to turn around and then try to find me a publisher. And then, it's 5 years later, and then maybe the book's coming out. Honestly,
5 years later, and then the books come out, and they gave you an advance, and then they won't give you royalties till that advance is paid off. And so, you're sitting there with an advance, but you don't own the rights of anything anymore at that point. And you didn't get to choose your illustrator. You didn't get to do, make those final decisions. And when I work with my clients, I steer them. I think we talked about hybrid publisher, vanity publishers last time I was on the show. But I want my clients to know that they're in charge. They're the boss. They're the publisher. And I consider myself a tool to be used for self-publishing. My services, from giving you editing guidance, where I threw my editor at you and you utilized her. Some things I do in-house, some things I don't, but illustrations, book formatting, layout, printing, design, things like that. I want it to be simple. It's a one-stop shop. They just need to talk to me, get a hold of me, and I'll steer them in the right direction. Or, it sounds like they can talk to you too. So that's great.
Definitely one of those things is once we became engaged, like you never really revealed what I would say too much, if that makes sense. It was like, okay, let me read your manuscript. Okay, what are some of your ideas for illustrations? Okay, let me get it to the editor. Let's start working on the formatting. Let's start doing, it wasn't, here's 20 things that we've got to get done in the next, 6 months. It was, okay, here's the next logical step. Here's the next logical step. And it was very easy to understand what those things were.
You mentioned some of these people that don't have access to technology, and I've met lots of clients. It's not just clients, but people in general that are like, oh, you do this? Well, let me show you. My grandmother has this whole book of songs she wrote, and she was singing me these songs, and she's like, I want to make a book out of some of these. I'm like, these are great. Like, your grandmother wrote and composed music. These are all like fabulous picture book ideas. So you never know where the next idea is, inspiration. It could be in your closet, could be a lot of my stuff's inspiration, but a lot of times it's other things. For this book I'm working on right now for myself is about tacos. I don't know. One day we're sitting in the car and my daughter, we were doing some alliteration and she talked about like 10 talking tacos or talking tacos. And so that's the title of the book. It's going to be called 10 Talking Tacos. And these tacos go through all these fun, adventurous things and they disappear one by one until there's like one left on a plate and you get to eat it, like I wanted to incorporate dinosaurs and all kinds of fun stuff with these tacos, ninja taco and all kinds of stuff. And so that was one inspirational moment. And then I'm currently working on a Chinese folktale story. My kids are half Taiwanese and it's important for me to share their culture too. So that was inspiration for this other one. It's going to be a it's going to be a moon festival story that I told while I was teaching English in Taiwan for 10 years. I used to tell it every year. Most of it was from the real folk tale, but then I would kind of twist and turn it and make it into my own. And so it's a fabulous story. I'm excited about that. But inspiration comes everywhere. And I'm sure if you've got some listeners, they've probably known somebody or have their own ideas and, things like that.
Oh yeah. Well, the one woman I was talking to at this writers conference, her story is about inchworms, and one particular inchworm out of this family is like the youngest, the runt of the litter, and her story kind of progresses through from that particular the smallest inchworm, realizing some of their strengths and some of their gifts and abilities. And so, it's just kind of a different, and what's great is there's so many people that have like these stories and these things that have popped up, whether it's life experience or it's just looking at something a little bit different to where
different perspective.
Yeah. And not every children's book has to be dinosaurs and exploding, tractors and stuff. I mean,
for sure.
Those are always fun.
Inanimate objects. I mean, I see books all the time where someone's like, I'm going to, I'm going to give this pencil, this pencil is going to be a character in this book. And it's great when they can think like that,
Yeah. Nathan, how would people best be able to get a hold of you and check out the services and everything that you have to offer?
Well, my new website's up. It's babooky.com. Easy to say, easy to write once you write it the first time. babooky.com. That's a great place to just kind of see my services. There's a printing quote there. There's some other things you can do. I'm still working on the website, but it's good to go as of now for the most part. And then I'm on Instagram. I've been trying to build up my Instagram a bit. If they're on Instagram, they can follow me at Babooky Tips. Babooky had already been taken, so I'm Babooky Tips. And what I plan to do is just give tips and information, little tidbits of stuff. For example, the 5 things that picture book authors may need, or, how to bring your word count down, like 3 ways to bring your word count down. I want to give tips, but I also want to share book trailers that I've worked on, maybe audiobook tidbits, and some, like I showed your cover there too as well. And I see your cover back there behind your head there.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, those are and I mean, I'm on Facebook. What I need to be doing is cross promoting, all my sites and stuff. I have my brother-in-law, he's like, you need to get a TikTok, and I don't know. It's tough for me to want to get a TikTok.
Yeah, we had talked about all that stuff where, all this stuff is good stuff to get your word out and your message and promote the books and all that stuff. But it does soak up time. And when this isn't your, full-time job, at least, with me, if I add another piece of social media, if I add something else, it's carving out more and more time of my day that I've got to spend on it. So
Yeah,
it's
I
definitely a
know your
balancing
feeling.
act between like what's the right mix and how much time and all that kind of good stuff.
I wanted to say, I've had numerous clients that have been, grandparents, and they've worried about how are we going to sell our books and stuff because they don't have that technology, technological background. Um, One of them was from Alaska. She did a book about this pig character, and Alaska's big on cabbage farming. Um, but anyways, this pig character takes place in a cabbage patch and stuff like that. She has sold out all of her books, and she was doing mostly markets and stuff. So I mean, I don't, if you're listening and you're worried about getting your books out, yes, you have to do a little legwork, but it doesn't have to be online necessarily. It can be through word of mouth, the old fashioned way, like you said, markets, word of mouth, face to face, hand to hand. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, and our friend Thal has an interesting model in that he gets local chamber of commerce participants to sponsor him to go into schools and do book readings and do events in schools, and that everybody for the, let's say first grade of whatever elementary school, they all get a book, benefit from one of the Chamber of Commerce people that he's connected with. So it's a gift from them and a nice little marketing thing. Thal sells the books, and then Thal gets a chance to go in and do presentations about bullying and courage, or whatever the message that's around that book, and all those kids get a free book to take home and practice reading with.
Yeah, and he does well with that marketing strategy, I'd say. He's moved a lot of books in his time.
Yep.
He's moved a lot of books. So, um, this other these other grandparents, twin sisters, they did a book that was about Jesus and the Christmas story, and I helped them self-publish that book, of course. But they they're going through churches, and they actually got a donor, somebody who donated all the funds from their church, and they get in return they gave them a couple boxes of books. They got to use it as a tax write-off, so there's lots of ways to go about it. And now they have a book that they've sold lots of copies with because it's a Christmas story, and around Christmas time is where they moved a lot of those books.
Sure, that makes sense.
Yeah, it's been a journey for you, and I hope you've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed working with you and seeing this book come to life. I think it turned out great.
Yeah, I'm excited for it. And to your point, all these little things that we've had to work through, and I would say this for anybody that's thinking about doing a children's book and self-publishing and all that. Once you've gone through this once and have set some of these things up, you can just rinse and repeat. When you have the new book that comes out, you've already set yourself up on Amazon. You've already connected with local Barnes and Noble and local bookstores, farmers markets. You've already, you've kind of moved through that learning process. So now let's say book 2, book 3, book 4, whatever that is, you become an old pro at this pretty quickly.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, everyone's got to start from, everyone's got to go through the learning curve in a way. And even me, I'm constantly learning stuff. I'm not a know-it-all. I've just been there a lot longer than a lot of people. And this is my business to know as much as I can. So, but with that being said, there's not one answer in how to get to, we talked about this, and to get into Barnes and Noble, there was a few different ways you could try to go about it. And some people have had success doing a walk-in. I've known authors that have just walked in and said, "Hey, I've got a book," and they've given them a signing event, put their books on the shelf. And then me, on the other hand, I go into the same, a Barnes and Noble, and they're like, yeah, you got to do it this way. You've got to submit it through online. And so it's a learning curve, even for me, is kind of what I'm getting at. But I don't want people to feel that they are struggling. Come to me. I'll give you some answers. I'll give you some guidance.
Yeah, for sure. And that's the thing too, is, if you're a first timer and you're looking to get into this and you've got a story, get it down on paper and then start reaching out and getting feedback and start to get in that game. Because I think one of the things that, always pulls at people's heartstrings is when people realize that so-and-so had 5 unpublished manuscripts in their footlocker, when they went into the nursing home or they retired or passed on or whatever. And, they never went from putting that idea onto paper and then trying to do something with it. And the way the industry has completely changed around, we've all got control over this. So, and that's the way I look at it. I'm going through this exercise. I'm learning. I'm doing a lot of this on my own and with Nathan, but it's giving me control over how this is going to work out. And it's just taking that first initial step forward and contacting somebody and getting into it.
Yeah, I want to another point. I meet people that are always skeptical. Hey, I and this kind of goes back to what you said, finding the manuscripts that are unpublished. Sometimes people are nervous about sharing their work. Just, hey, what if they don't like it? There's that, of course. But there's also, what if they steal it? What if they take it and make their own book and stuff like that? And I've submitted my manuscripts to agents, to publishers, and I've always gotten that when I go to these events and learn stuff, they don't want to steal your manuscript. They would rather work with you. It's not like, as a first-time author, they're not spending billions of dollars on you. They're spending a couple thousand for an advance for your manuscript. So why would they want to, possibly have a lawsuit or anything like that? Now, with that said, ideas are plentiful. A lot of people are coming up with the same ideas over and over again. It's hard to say that this is just my idea. I know that happens. But for me, especially B, I have in my list of books, I've probably got 20 books that I'm working on right now, and they're all my ideas. I'm not looking to borrow anyone's ideas. I would rather work with my clients and get their idea out. I want to see their vision put out there. It gives me a sense of accomplishment to help people. And I know you probably feel the same way when you got your book, but I just love the feeling of, hey, he's got that in his hand. It's tangible. It's there. And I know how it feels when I get my books. I love that feeling.
Yep, absolutely.
But no one's going to steal their ideas. And I know that's one of those things that they just have to kind of get over, but it's not going to happen,
Right.
And they worry about copyright. Copyright is the moment your pencil touches paper, it's your idea. Whether it was your idea alone and this whole in this whole world, that's another question. But if you write something down and it somehow gets moved over to someone, and all of a sudden that person publishes, that manuscript, and it's traceable, hey, I showed this to them, they're in some big trouble, But it's yours. You don't have to go get a copyright. You can go pay to get something copyrighted, but you don't have to. It's even on the government copyright website, they just say it's an extra layer of protection, and they say it right on the website. The moment your pencil basically touches paper, it's copyrighted.
Yeah. Well, that's great information, because even at the writers conference, to your point, there were still a lot of people that were, especially during the screenplay one, well, I'm nervous about, how do I protect myself? How do I do this? And the person up there was like, look, once you're done with it, you can, upload it to this one site and you're on record forever and a day. And that's just screen printing or a script or whatnot. But yeah, they were saying the exact same thing. It's like, they want to work with you. You're the one with the idea. They're so busy running around doing day-to-day stuff that, why not work with the creator and just, be a good partner with them. So.
Right. And it's a tough market to crack, going the traditional publishing racket there. I mean, I've submitted to agents, but I'm a little like what you mentioned earlier. By the time your book is done, we're talking 2 to 3 years, 4 years later. And sometimes I just want to see something come out. So I'm a little impatient and I have these ideas. So I mentioned I had 20 manuscripts. What I do is I'm like, okay, which ones do I want to really self-publish now, and which ones am I going to try to submit to agents? So I kind of put those up, separate those, and then we'll see. Every year when I'm ready to print a book, I'll figure out which one I pull from my stash and which one I'm going to continue, pushing to agents.
Nathan, I've had you on for a while. Is there anything about our work together or about Babooky that I didn't ask you about or we didn't bring up that you want to bring up?
No, I think we've pretty well touched on everything, the services and the website and stuff like that. But I'm excited for you, and I'm ready for you. I'm ready to watch you in your next step, Greg.
All right.
So thank you again for having me on. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, it's been awesome, and look forward to letting you know when I need another set of books to come over.
Yeah, sounds good. Thank you much, sir.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
I know this was a unique conversation that I had with Nathan, but I hope it really did help you understand where the idea for this children's book has come from, how it evolved, how working with Nathan and being introduced to him through Thal Dixon really was able to help me move this from an idea and something kicking around in my head to a physical product that I'm now running around and trying to sell to the local Barnes & Noble and a couple of local bookshops around here, as well as on my website. We really do want to help inspire you that if you have an idea for a book, get it written down, start writing it. Once you get going, then you can definitely reach out to people like Nathan and people that can help start doing editing and start helping with that framework. And once you get started, once you get into this current, like I was talking about, you're going to find that it's a really enjoyable process, that you're going to learn a lot if it's the first time through. And it's not quite as scary and foreboding as maybe you could have made it up in your head. So if you got that book, I really encourage you to get it written down and jump in the game. Get that thing out into the marketplace or create it and work with it and publish it, even if it's just within your own family. I mean, there's lots of great software tools that you could just do your own thing, create a great PDF, create something unique that, maybe you only want to share it with 10 people or so. But whatever it is, I do encourage you to get that book idea out of your head onto some, let's say, paper, even if you're using software, and make sure that you share it with the world, because you've got a unique perspective and a unique story that the world needs to hear. So until next time, remember to stay cool. Thank you for listening to the Cool Grandpa Podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, please do me a favor and share it with a friend. That's the best way you can help us to expand our community, as well as get the news out about how valuable grandpas are in the lives of those kids. If you'd like to leave me a comment or shoot me a potential topic for this podcast, please go to www.cool-grandpa.us. Look for the comments tab, fill it out, hit submit. It's as easy as that. Until next time, remember to stay cool.